I'm just going to say it right in the beginning of this video. This was a wild experiment because I wore these height boosting shoes or these elevator shoes to boost my height. And I wanted to see, did people treat me differently? Was it any different? Was it easier or harder when it comes to dating? And a lot more. And there are some really unique things I experienced.
Oh, hi, Mark.
What's up, Freccero fam? Welcome back to my channel. We like to experience everything that life has to offer. And by experiencing everything that life has to offer, I really mean it, especially for this video. Because one big topic surrounding dating is being a short king, being a short guy. And for me, in case you didn't know, I am 5'7". I'm considered a short king, as they call it. And this, for some reason, has been a big topic of conversation lately regarding dating as a short guy. There's a lot of talk about it on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and a lot more. Even SNL has done skits about it. And the big topic of conversation is this: women preferring taller men. And so in this video, I want to answer this question. Do women actually not like short kings, or is there something else going on? First off, I want to start off small, pun intended, with my history. I know this sounds a bit weird. Some things I'm going to talk about in this video might be a bit touchy, right? I'll be honest, but I want to be honest and transparent as I am in all my videos. I am a short guy, as the average height for a man in America is 5'9". Now, here's one thing I want to say, jumping right into this in terms of the unique backstory. And I know how this is going to come off, but again, I want to start at this point. I feel like dating for me, hooking up with people, meeting girls, all that kind of stuff, never really been an issue. And I want to start there because I graduated college in 2012. Sounds random, but this is a very important point. I'll talk about that a bit later. But I did not know, and I swear I'm not making this up, that height was really an issue when it came to dating until about my senior year of college in about 2011. And I first heard about it because one of my friends who was taller than me, keep in mind, was complaining like, oh man, it's annoying. Like girls, they just don't like short guys. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, I know some people prefer to be taller in general, but I swear I'm not making this up, that when it came to the dating scene, it never really was an issue for me. And I want to say that because when I was in high school and in college, I was constantly dating, constantly meeting new people. I'm very outgoing, very confident as well. And even as a 5'7" short king, never really was an issue. And it was crazy that the first time I heard about this being an issue, like I said, was my senior year of college. Because for me, looking back, actually on a lot of my girlfriends, girls I hooked up with, girls I had a fling with or whatever, sometimes they were taller than me. And it literally never bothered me. And I never really even noticed that much. And I'm not making that up when I say that. And I've noticed it since then, since 2012, since I graduated. I feel like the whole topic of height, short men, being a short guy when it comes to dating being an issue, I've noticed that's become a lot more popular of a topic of conversation. So for this video, I was curious, with that backstory being put into place, what would it be like if I was taller? What would it really be like? And like I said in the intro, in terms of my protocol for this experiment, I wore these height boosting shoes. These are from Calto, in case you're curious. I have a link listed below to them if you want to check them out. And these brought me from 5'7" to 5'10". Now I know some people are like, wait, only 5'10"? Bear with me. Like I said, I am a short king at 5'7", right? And you can't really tell they're height boosting shoes. Like, these just kind of look normal. But right here, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of tough on camera, there's a lift. So in the back here, they go up like that. And as a result of this lift, it gives you a height boost of 3 inches. And what I decided to do is this: go out, meet girls, talk to them normally, start talking to them, and about a few minutes into the conversation, say, hey, I have to ask you a question. Do you like these shoes? And then in the middle of the bar, the nightclub, the outdoor patio, wherever I was, I'd say, okay, I have to tell you the truth. These are actually height boosting shoes. And what I want to know is this a big deal for you or not? And what I do is actually take off the shoes. And the girls could see, and some guys were there as well, my height clearly drop, right? Very, very apparently clearly drop. And what I would try to do to the best of my ability is kind of read them, see like, okay, are they being like, oh, or are they into it? Do they not care? Does it bother them or not? And then I would ask them like, hey, be honest. I'm doing this experiment in the name of psychology, in the name of science. Be brutally, truthfully honest with me. Is this a big deal for you? Now that you can see my true height, is this a big deal for you? And one thing I want to say for all my scientists out there is yes, I know it's not the most hardcore, controlled, variable experiment with really good protocol. I know that. This is something I did kind of for fun as an experiment. Might as well say that as a side note. Here's what I learned though. One is I noticed about 20% of the time, I did have women be like, make a look, or say to me verbally like, yeah, I'm not trying to be mean. I know you asked. I do actually think I'd like you with the shoes on more. Like I prefer taller men. So I'm not gonna lie, like if I met you without the shoes on, I don't think I'd be as into you. And they were brutally honest. About 80% of the time though, I had girls be like, honestly, not that big of a deal. Like, yeah, I can see that you're shorter, but you're a really nice guy. You're very confident. I like your personality. I did talk to them for maybe about 5-ish minutes, give or take. And that is a very important point, which I'll talk about in a second. The second thing I noticed though, which was really fascinating, is the initial approach. Because I wanted to notice, just walking around before I approached people, did people look at me more? And I have to say, yes. Even those 3 inches, going from 5'7" to 5'10", I was very observant, as I do go out a lot. I do meet a lot of people, and there's a very clear difference that I found girls tend to look at me more. In addition to that, another thing that I noticed is when I would open or start talking to girls, they warmed up faster and easier. It was very, very noticeable. That was probably the biggest unique thing I noticed on this experiment, among a lot of stuff I am going to talk about, is that it was a pretty clear difference. Just in those 3 inches, that when I would approach girls, they seemed to warm up quicker, faster, and easier. So on one end, and I will talk about a lot of unique things in this video, like I said, there's a lot to talk about. On one end, I can see where a lot of short kings are coming from. When they complain, super annoying and all this kind of stuff, there is some truth to that. Got to be honest, after doing this experiment, that I will say when it comes to the initial approach and women noticing you, yes, there is some truth to that. But this is the big thing. After a few minutes of talking to them, even after I took off the shoes and they noticed my height drop, most of the time, it wasn't any different. There were some times where I took off my shoes, they could see the height drop, and I said, hey, do you like this or not? Are you now more turned off, or do you not care, right? Like I mentioned earlier. There were other times, though, where I did not take off the shoes at all. I kept them on the entire time, and they did not know until later that I actually had the height-boosting shoes. And one important point I noticed is this. Well, yes, the initial approach and initially talking to them was easier. Past the first few minutes of initially meeting them, everything was the same. Wearing the shoes, I felt like after a few minutes of the initial first impression, didn't really have that much more of an impact on getting their number, meeting up with them later, etc., etc. And I want to mention that because I will be talking about a lot in this video, both sides of do women actually not like short men, because sometimes I feel like, yes, short men have a point. I noticed very clearly that it was way easier to approach, and I noticed women notice me more. But I have to ask the question, is it the fact that you're actually short that they don't like you? Or do you have short energy? Because being honest, like I said, past those first few minutes of that initial first impression and it being easier to talk to them, things weren't any easier, in my opinion, wearing the height-boosting shoes. The conversation, the way things flowed, was the exact same, in my opinion, whether I was wearing those shoes or not. And yes, of course, first impressions are definitely a big deal, but I gotta be honest, wearing these shoes wasn't that crazy of a difference as I initially expected it to be. And in my opinion, it really all comes down to one thing, which is perception. Because one thing I've learned when doing this experiment, even researching a lot of studies and everything, after reading, like say, a lot of books about evolutionary psychology, attraction, all this kind of stuff, it appears to be that when it comes to men, when we look at somebody, we look at their physical attributes, as in like, are they attractive or not? So like if a guy says a girl's hot or not, purely how she looks. But they have found in a lot of studies in a lot of different ways that with women, it's more with the perception around them. For example, they've had studies where they have, like say, a man and a woman wear jeans and a t-shirt, right? People rank their attractiveness or rate them. And then they have them switch out their outfits, whether it's a nice outfit, a low-key outfit, pajamas, all of these different types of outfits. And they find with men, regardless of whatever the woman is wearing, they rate them about the same. With women, it's not the case. Depending on what the guy is wearing can actually affect how they rate him, which is really, really interesting. And because the clothing, like say it's a high-end clothing item or whatever, gives some context clues of the perception. So it's not just about him physically, but the other attributes. There was another super interesting study where they walked around and asked a bunch of people, guy and girl, how attractive would you rate this man or woman, right? They showed them a picture. Then they changed one word. They said, how attractive would you rate this married man, or how attractive would you rate this married woman? And what they found with men is it didn't change anything. When they looked at the woman, whether she was married or not, whether they had that extra word in there, same rating. Not the case with women. They found that when they said, how attractive would you rate this married man, they ranked him on average 20% hotter, even though they stressed just based off physical appearance. And I gotta be honest, I did hesitate making this video because I know this is a bit of like a dicey topic, especially right now, but I do think it's really interesting, right? I'm very fascinated by psychology, the way people work, especially when it comes to dating and evolutionary psychology. And I want to talk about perception because there are a few unique things that I experienced. To tell a couple stories, just to give an example, there was one time, for example, I was dating a girl who was a volleyball player. She was at 6'2", 6'3". This is the third time we hooked up. And on the third time of us meeting up and hooking up and all that kind of stuff, we were talking about height. And she goes, yeah, Mark, I'm kind of glad, I'm not going to lie, that you're like about 6'1", 6'2", because I can't really date shorter guys. And I started laughing, being like, what do you mean? Are you joking? She goes, no. And I'm like, I'm not 6'1" or 6'2". I'm short. I'm like 5'7". And she goes, there's no way. I was like, wait. Okay, stand up. Again, this is the third time of us meeting up. We've hooked up before, that kind of stuff. She stood up. I was like this, looking up at her. She looked down at me, and she was like, wait, what? And her reaction was almost as if I showed her how like a magic trick was done. She was in complete disbelief, being like, wait, you are short. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, this has not been a surprise to anybody. And she goes, I don't know. I just never. And she was like flabbergasted by this concept. There was another time I remember I was hanging out with some of my childhood friends, about half guys, half girls. So we had, elementary school together, middle school, high school, and we were in college, hanging out, kind of catching up. And we were talking about dating. And someone said, well, Mark, I think it's easier for you to meet girls like you're 6'1". So of course it's going to be easier for you because you're a tall guy. And the weird thing was, and I remember this so vividly, that all the girls were like, yeah, you're 6'1". And all the guys were like, no offense to Mark, but he's not 6'1". Mark's short. Mark's 5'7". And all the girls were like, what do you mean? Mark's 6'1". And I was like, wait a minute. How come all the girls view me as 6'1", but all my guy friends view me as my, what I'm going to say, correct height, as a short king, as being 5'7"? And then I remember one of my friends, who's a bit shyer, not in a bad way, but a bit shyer, a bit more to himself, that kind of thing, was like, yeah, guys, I'm 6'1". And then all the girls said, wait, you're 6'1". We actually thought you were more 5'7". And then, of course, we did that classic thing where we're like, okay, wait, stand up. We did like, back-to-back, head-to-head type thing. And all the girls are almost shocked, being like, wait a minute, Mark, you're way shorter than we thought. And then on the other hand, they're like, hey, to my other friend, they're like, hey, you're way taller than we thought. And then one last story I want to tell. I have a lot of these, but to make this video as short as possible, one last story I want to tell, which again is another interesting one that's happened to me a few times actually, is I remember I met a girl on Tinder, was talking to her, and she said, how tall are you? And I said, 5'7". She said, hey, Mark, I'm sorry. You seem like a nice guy, but I just don't like short kings. I'm sorry. You seem like a great guy, but I hate to say it. I like guys who are like, I think it's 5'10" or 5'11" and taller. And I was like, hey, no big deal. No issue. I get it. You're into what you're into. And then I think it was about a week or two later, I saw her at a bar. And I walked by her and I made eye contact. I'm like, wait a minute. Started talking. And that night we ended up hooking up. And I remember the next day being like, hey, like I'm kind of curious, like not to be weird, but I remember you saying that you weren't really into short kings, and I get it. Again, I'm not hating on that at all, but I'm here. Like, if you don't mind me asking, like, what was it? And she's like, honestly, Mark, I don't know how to describe it, but you just didn't act short. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, I don't know. She goes, you just didn't act short. Like when you said you were 5'7" on Tinder, I just not into short guys, but when I met you in person and all this kind of stuff, like I just don't look at you as short. I don't know, you just don't come off as short to me. And I use these few stories as examples. The one thing I've noticed as being a short king my entire life, being 5'7", of course, my entire life, that I noticed that a lot of it comes down to the perception of height, not just height itself. Now, don't get me wrong. I think, after wearing the shoes even, being taller is definitely better than being shorter. There is no question there. Then again, I do want to say that a lot of it comes down to perception. And this is a big thing I've noticed, for example, when it comes to dating apps, that I've noticed when I've mentioned like, hey, I'm 5'7" to women, like say on dating apps who've not met me yet, I find it usually doesn't go well. I'll be honest. That a lot of women say, hey, sorry, 5'7", too short for me. And I'm like, hey, no big deal. You're into what you're into. And you could take this in a few different ways. For example, you could take it as actual perception. And I will say this as a side note, I hope I'm not like poking a hornet's nest with a stick or like opening up Pandora's box here. Again, I'm just talking about what I've learned in psychology and the books I've read and my own personal experience. But I feel like with men, for better or for worse, when they view somebody, how they're going to rank them 1 through 10 is how they're going to rank them. Whether they're biking, snowboarding, whether they're wearing an expensive fashion outfit, whether they are with other people, they're going to rank them the exact same way. But with women, even when asked, rank them purely on physical appearance. With the other stuff and the other context going on, it can affect his attractiveness, right? So on one end, you could argue when it comes to this whole height thing, is it just perception? On the other end, you could also argue, maybe when it comes to me, and I have had women say this to me, like, hey, Mark, I'm not gonna lie, I'm just not into short men. And I know you are a short king. No offense, not trying to hate on you, but because you're so nice, because you're so outgoing, and I really liked your personality, I was able to overlook that, pun intended, I was able to overlook your height. And this happens with both guys and girls, right? Where, like, say you're really invested in this one particular trait, they don't have it. They don't have that look or that personality trait that you want, but you're able to overlook it because the other parts of them are just way better and almost make up for it in a sense. And that is one reoccurring theme I'm gonna say throughout this video when it comes to these short kings out there is it the fact that you're actually short that's holding you back from dating, all this kind of stuff? Or is it that you have short energy? And I know maybe not the most easygoing, casual question to ask, but I do want to say that because going back to the shoes, being 3 inches taller, which is only 5'10", by the way, not that still crazy of a height, only 5'10", even still, I did notice a difference, but only in the beginning, only in the initial approach, only in the first couple minutes did I find it easier wearing the shoes, and it was definitely noticeable, but past that, I felt like the rest of the conversation and my results, if I'd worded it like that, weren't really any different. And I think a lot of it, in my opinion, comes down to how do you handle yourself? You know, are you going to therapy? Are you working on your business? Are you working on yourself? Are you going to the gym? Are you healthy? Are you well groomed? Do you treat people with respect? Are you very confident? Are you just fun? Do you have a good sense of humor? Of course, a lot of women say that a guy who's funny is a huge turn on. Of course, that makes perfect sense. With that being said, though, I always try to look at both sides. And on one end, sometimes I feel like, look, some short kings are just complaining because it's not really ever been an issue for me personally and other maybe short kings that I know. On the other end, though, I feel like there is something to be said, that it was very noticeable, that it was easier wearing the height boosting shoes, but not by that much. Not by as much that a lot of short guys complain about. And I feel like if you are a short guy, in general, I think you're way better off meeting people in person than online. Because that's a big thing I've noticed, right? That online, I feel like I do way worse because people have this perception of a 5'7" guy, but in person, when they meet me, again, like I said, I'm not wearing the shoes and I am my actual height, I find I've never really had a problem. And when it comes to talking about all this, I do want to bring up height fishing. Now, in case you don't know what that is, height fishing is like say when a guy wears these shoes, like say I wear them out, but I don't tell the girl until like say it's too late, so to speak, that actually I'm a lot shorter than I seem I am, right? The idea that you hook somebody in because they think you're taller, but you're actually not. This is definitely, I think, a bit opening up Pandora's box. So I'm going to try to tread lightly here, so to speak. But that's also an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of TikTok videos, and there's been a lot of, new ads and new products coming out being like, hey, wear these height-boosting soles, these height-boosting shoes, all this kind of stuff, right? And it's interesting because a lot of people have come out saying, hey, I'm not going to lie, I think it's kind of messed up. And I hate to say it, I could see that side. I could see that perspective that if I was a woman and I preferred height, and a guy's like, say, 5'7", but he looks 5'10" because of the shoes, I'd be a bit put off. I'm like, hey, it's kind of height fishing, right? Like you're expecting one thing, but you get another thing. But then there are some counter arguments of saying, well, women wear makeup all the time to kind of adjust their appearance. Women wear push-up bras to adjust their appearance. I was talking with one of my girlfriends about this experiment, for example, and she said, well, it's kind of ironic that as a woman, looking at, like, say, at a guy, if he's wearing shoes that are height boosting, so he's going from 5'7" to 5'10", that's kind of messed up. I feel like societally, people look at that in a negative way, but as a woman, I can easily wear 5-inch heels, no one bats an eye. And if anything, height is more important for men than it is for women, right? And again, an interesting perspective, right? And I can kind of see that because there are some height boosting shoes that literally boost your height by like 5 inches. That means if I did that, I'd go from 5'7" to 6 feet. I almost thought about doing that because I'm like, okay, if I'm going to send this experiment and do it, might as well go all out. But I'm like, I don't know. 5 inches is a lot. The shoes are exactly 5.2 inches of a height boost. That is ridiculous. But I see both sides because on one end, I'm like, I feel like that's really messed up. It's a full-on bait and switch. It's definitely height fishing where you're a woman expecting an over 6 foot man and he's only 5'7". I think that's kind of messed up to me personally, right? For a guy to do that. On the other end, a lot of guys argue, well, hey, girls have push-up bras, girls who wear tons of makeup, mascara, foundation, eyeliner, the list goes on and on. There's even butt padding now and special pants to make your butt look bigger and make it look better, right? And I feel like on this video, we've talked about so many unique things regarding height, psychology, attraction, perception, all this kind of stuff. I gotta say, overall, a very interesting experiment. And I think the big takeaways are this. To kind of sum up a lot of things that I've talked about in this video, so many different side tangents, is this. One, I'm going to say, and I'm going to conclude that yes, I think being taller is better than being shorter as a guy when it comes to dating. Whether it's online dating or in-person dating, it is better. Two, though, not by much. And I think this is the big point, not by much. I think online, in my opinion, being a taller guy has way bigger of a weight because of the perception. I talked a lot about perception, used just a few examples of my own personal experience. I think there is a perception to that of being a short guy versus a taller guy, which is why I think dating in person and meeting people in the wild, as it's called now, I think is a lot better for my short kings out there. And yes, while being taller is better, I will definitely say that, not by that much, like I stressed. Like past those first few minutes of meeting somebody, that initial first impression, how the whole conversation, the flow and what happened and everything, how it all went would be the exact same in my opinion, whether I was wearing the shoes or not, whether I took off the shoes and showed them my actual height or not. Past those first few minutes, being taller or shorter, in my opinion, didn't really have that much of an impact. And if it did, very, 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 very minimal. Truly short, if I'm going to say it like that, like 1% or 2. That's it. And it really comes down to that one question I've already mentioned. Is it the fact that short men have a difficult time dating because women don't like short kings? Or is it the fact of the way people perceive you because of the way you handle yourself?